Hello, hello, hello. Welcome along, everybody, to this Light and Land live stream. We are bang on time, even with four of us. This is a miracle. I'm very happy to welcome you all along. All the people watching live, thank you very much for giving us your Monday evening. And if anyone's watching on catch up, thank you very much. We hope we're keeping you awake / sending you off to sleep, depending on why you've watched this in the first place. We're going to be talking all things autumn, and I'm joined by three wonderful photographers. Should I say wonderful once more? They're wonderful, and they're very excited to be here. So let me just work my way around the clock, because it's very difficult when there's four of us. I've got to make sure we're not all just talking at once. So firstly, Ed, good evening. How are we, sir?
Good evening, Sam. Very well. Evening, everybody. Delighted to be here and looking forward to sharing some autumn thoughts and looking at some really nice images.
Absolutely. Got your Canon printer there. Are you ready to smash out a big A1 or something?
I can live print during the session, but it might be a bit noisy.
Yeah, it might finish just by the time we're done as well. Verity, good evening. How are we?
I'm grand. I'm good. It's a Monday. I'm still on holiday technically, so I'm enjoying that. But yeah, I'm happy to be here with you fine fellows.
Thank you. You're Midlands, you home at the moment?
I am indeed, yeah. This is my spare room. No printer. Can't fit one.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. And we've also got Andy joining us from lovely Dorset. We're not far apart, Andy, but
we're not. No,
even closer tonight.
Exactly. Yeah. Hi everybody.
Nice to have you along. And Andy, I know, like all of us, probably, although I'm the odd one out here because kind of winter's my favourite, but autumn is a very rich time photographically, especially obviously for landscape photographers. And what we're going to do is talk through 15 beautiful landscape images from these fine folk here, and I shall be acting as the person trying to ask some sensible questions. But to make my job easier, please, if you'd like to ask any other sensible questions, of course, or even more sensible questions, do pop them in the comments box. If you're watching on Facebook, just pop a comment, or on YouTube. You do need to be signed in if you're watching on YouTube, but we are streaming in 1080 HD over there. Before you know it, we'll be in the cinemas. But just a usual...
I filter on my face in that case, Sam, if it's going to be high resolution.
Sorry, I should have warned everyone. But a quick hello to everyone who's out there watching. Jez, yes, you're on time this week. Well done. You're forgiven for last time's discrepancy. Let's call it miscreant. If you are watching along from somewhere wonderful in the world, or indeed just from somewhere mundane in the world, where I would argue all four of us are, do let us know. Tony in Warwickshire, I will let you all decide where's mundane and where's not. Barbara in Bucks. Jane in Poole, another Dorseter. Well done. And here we go. Look at this. Huge talent in the room, Kate says. I assume she's sat with Charlie somewhere. John, hello from Limerick. You're winning the exciting place to live at the moment, John. And Astrid is in Surrey. Oh, hello, Astrid. She's watching along as well. You're going to be with me soon, Sue. Cool, right. Nice one. I'm really looking forward to this. So without any further ado, let's get into it. What we have got is a bit of a mix. Obviously, autumn shouts woodland, shouts lovely colours for obvious reasons, and there's a good amount of that tonight, but in a lovely variety of ways. The guys, I'm sorry, I'm just going to call that for group sensations there, have all been very good in providing me a really nice mix of images, and I hope I've curated this in an interesting way for everyone as we walk through some of their images. And like I say, I want to just get a little bit more about them from the particular images, about thoughts about shooting in autumn, some of the gear they might use, some of the we're going to talk a little bit about weather as we get in, and maybe apps and things like that we can talk about, as well as looking out the window, the classic one. So if you do have anything, like I say, that you want to hit us up for, let us know in the comments. Right, let us get into it. That's a bit of a preamble whilst I let everybody get on board. And bada boom, bada bing, we're going straight out the bat with something that just screams autumn. And we're going to take it in turns here. Andy is up first. This is one of yours, and I wanted to just start with a real classic autumn kind of image that a lot of landscape photographers might think about. But as you and I and everyone watching this know, making these sorts of images can be quite tricky, and the skill is making it look more simple than it is. But maybe before we dive into a bit of that and complexities of shooting in woodland, can you just give us, Andy, a little bit of background of where we are here and maybe the sort of time of autumn this might have been as well?
This was North Dorset last year. It was sort of quite near the end of autumn, and it had been a bit of a frustrating year of not getting any mist when we wanted them. But luckily, the misty morning happened just as the colour was peaking. So, despite it looking like a very calm, peaceful picture, it was a bit of a frantic run around the woods trying to find the right tree in the right place with the right separation and the right colourful branches. But yeah, it was good fun. And when the conditions are like that, it's just about finding a nice star of the show, I suppose, to have at the front and then place everything behind. And just a few steps one side to the, from side to side can make a big difference to the composition, really.
Yes, I mean you've touched on a lot there, which you've sort of glossed over very modestly about about certain things that obviously we look for. We're going to talk about conditions later, so I'm going to just park that temporarily. But
sure.
Finding the star and allowing the star to shine, so to speak, relies on a lot of those elements you talked about with separation, perhaps, and what you've done so beautifully here is find that, even if every single little combination of trees I'm looking at here, there's little gaps, little gaps, little gaps. So you've mentioned there just a few steps either way. Is the process a little bit of finding your main star and then finessing down from there? Is that fair to say?
Usually, yeah, I think that's usually the way. Occasionally you get lucky and you find something epic right at the beginning, and then it's hard then to run around and look for other things. But yeah, I think quite often just identifying one tree and working around that is a good starting point, really. And it's as much about what's not in the image as what's in the image as well. So I think using a zoom lens and compressing with a slightly longer focal length in the woods is often a really decent strategy. I think if you had too much of the tops coming into the trees, your eye kind of gets drawn up to the light part. So I think, in this instance, it was quite a dense bit of wood, so that was quite easy to do, really.
That we're going to talk a little bit about positioning oneself within woods, edges of woods, middle of woods. The more you get in, the trickier it can get, right? Sometimes because there's just stuff in front of you.
Often the edges of the woods are quite good because they're not quite so dark. So when it's misty, you want the light to be able to come in from behind usually. So you're usually positioning yourself into the sun a bit, particularly if you think there might be sunbeams when the sun gets strong. And you don't tend to get those in the middle of the woods quite so often. So usually sort of thin, narrow sections of wood can be quite good, actually.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So just for everyone, a few people have joined on a little bit later. So welcome, everyone. We're here with Ed, Andy and Verity tonight. We're talking all things autumn. Lots of woodland, not just that, though. Some nice detail shots, a little bit of extended techniques, and also talking about some what would I say, non-traditional autumnal images. So we've got a really nice mix of stuff, and we've kicked off obviously this with Andy in North Devon. I'm gonna just probably North Dorset. Sorry, Andy. Sorry, neither of us crossed the border, do we? We're not
No.
We're not brave enough to go over there. Just finally, before I move on, you mentioned, and we'll touch on maybe gear in even more detail as we go through. You mentioned using slightly longer lenses. So do you often walk around maybe with the 70-200 on and left on, or what sort of stuff might you operate with?
I use 24-105 a lot in the woods, and occasionally I'll put the 100-500 on and then shoot panoramas and stitch them together. And then you get the extra compression from the long lens, but obviously then you only get a bit of a tree in. So then the trick is to turn the camera up the other way and shoot 3 or 4. And you don't have to have a panorama. You can still end up with a standard ratio picture, but it's technically a stitched pano. So that way you've got the best of both worlds. You've got a wide field of view, but with a compressed focal length.
Yeah.
So it's a really, really good trick for woodland, actually.
Nice. You guys better pay attention tonight because there's just gems just drop in for everybody here. All right, these are like, we've got heavy hitters with us tonight. This is so cool. Okay, I'm going to keep it rolling because we've got a lot to get through. So Andy, thank you very much for now. We'll come back to you. And guys, if anyone in the chat has any queries as we go, do feel free to shout. I wanted to just change the gear a little bit though, because obviously when we go out there, we all see in different ways, we all look for different things, and obviously all of these guys have a vast variety of things within their portfolios, but Verity very kindly included this one within the set for tonight. And I wanted, I suppose, to ask Verity whether you found your viewpoint, as it were, for looking for detail images, whether you found that something has developed over a period of years and whether you look for them more than you maybe did before, or whether it's something you've always looked for and enjoyed.
This is more me wandering around irritated that the conditions aren't quite what I want, and it's a little bit of a, and I suppose I think there is that learning curve of the more you look, the more you see. But I think, and I don't know if other photographers fall into this pattern as well, that sometimes there's this notion that if the conditions aren't right, it's not really worth going out. And it can almost fall into that mindset, especially if you're somewhere like the Lake District. So this is taken on the shoreline of Buttermere. And I was there just, ready for some epic light to break through the clouds and backlight some rain, and it just was not happening. There was nothing. It was flat grey. And so this is a sort of a little lesson in letting go a bit as well, saying, okay, well, I'm not going to get what I want. So why don't I try and pivot, look around and see if anything else jumps out at me? And I often find that those little moments where I'm being taught something by the universe, or I'm learning something else about my practice, is when I create images that surprise me. So in the moment, I might not think about them, but I'll look at them later and think, oh, you know what? I really like that. It kind of sums up what I was trying to get from the bigger vista, with this idea of warm and cool and all of the conditions on that leaf. You can tell it's wet. You can tell it's a bit miserable. And I suppose it's a little bit about trying to make the conditions work for me as well, and not moping around the shoreline grumpy that I haven't got mists and light and everything that I asked for Christmas, thank you very much. So it's more about teaching, I think, and that's a lesson I think I have to learn over and over again, that I can't always get what I want. So, and sometimes in those moments, I get something else. In life, yes.
Yeah. No, that's really good. It's a really good point, because it happens to all of us all the time, right? And Ed and Andy, I'm sure we've all had this. Yeah, we might we might go with a certain thing in mind, and I think the thing you said there, Verity, which was really key, was just kind of pivot. Just kind of dealing with what you've got, dealing with what you've been given. Which is just different to what you thought about. It's not bad or good or whatever. It's just different. But I also think, again, you're being a little bit sneaky, because it's all very well to say that, but then to find that warm and cool idea on a different scale, positioning of things in the framing, choosing it as a square works really beautifully. Do you take multiple variants of this at various angles, or is it just me that can't work it out on the day?
Oh no, hundreds of shots. Right, just trying to get everything right, and then they're probably all still in my Lightroom, just waiting, sitting patiently for me to arrive back at them to do something with them. But yeah, I think with this one, I just wanted it. I think someone's asked if there's a polarizer that's used. I don't think so, because it's raining. So I think I would have put that away, because it would have been frustrating, because I would have tried to clean the polarizer. And so yeah, there's always a bit of finagling. But I feel like times like this is where you hone that art as well, because it's less headless chicken time, isn't it? So when you get the conditions, you're running around sort of like, I've got to make the most of this. This is more considered, think about it, hone those skills, and hopefully learn a little bit of something in the process. But yeah, I think it probably, it probably wasn't a square in my head at the time, but then I get it back into Lightroom and think, yeah, it works as a square because of where that leaf is and how everything else works in the frame.
Yeah. I presume you don't carry a pipette of water around with you to gently drizzle leaves. It's just me that does that, right? Okay, cool. Okay, Verity. Beautiful. I'm going to roll this on. Great points, though. Dave did ask about the polarizer. I didn't put it up immediately because every time I put a question up, Verity, it goes right over your face. So I'm sorry about that. Do not take it personally.
No, it's good for me. I'm happy with that. More questions, please.
And the polarizer question might be something we come up and cover as we go through. I know, Andy, you and I, when we do our New Forest Day, a lot of people we talked to about that as well, didn't we? And we've all got thoughts about that within the Woodland, etc. So we'll come to that generally, Dave, as well as Verity answering that specifically for you there as well. Cool. All right, Ed, my friend, you are up next.
Yes.
And one word which I feel when I see this image is texture. Texture. And you're a bit of a texture freak like me, right?
I'm afraid I have that affliction, Sam. Yes, I share that affliction. No, definitely. And I suppose the images I submitted tonight, I've tried to submit images which kind of have an autumnal point behind them, as it were, which might be slightly less obvious. So obviously we think about colour and as being one of the great advantages of being photographers in autumn, and there obviously is a lot of colour in this image, but the point about this image was the textures and also shadows. I think that's the point worth making, and it all hinges, I think, on the position of the sun in autumn, which is much lower. And so I find that looking at textures with low light, low as in the angle of the sun rather than light levels, is a wonderful thing to do because it does reveal rather more of them. And although as photographers we are obsessed with light and highlights and looking at bright parts of the image, what low light also allows you to do is control where the shadows fall in your image. And actually, I've taken a series of this scene, and in some of the earlier shots, the background, which is these sort of slightly dull and uninteresting pines, were lit, and the image just fell apart. It didn't work. And so the advantage of having a low sun is that that you can work with shadows far easier, I think, than perhaps in the summer months where everything is top lit and your lighting ratios are less controllable because you just get everything kind of bathed in very bright light often. And so I think that's the point of talking about this. It's about texture for me rather than color, and also making a point about controlling shadows and thinking about shadows and how that might aid your compositions and your image making. And you can do that in autumn because of the low sun positions.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some good examples of other scenarios where that sort of thought process applies, and we'll talk about those as we get there in different environments. But I think also, Ed, for me, we all love this feeling of sparkle, I would imagine, in these sorts of images. But again, also the composition really works beautifully because we've got this little bit of buffering above and below, and the reason you discussed there about the shadows, they're helping that separation, and the color is really important for me too. Actually, I know the thrust of this was around the texture, but I think those colors, especially in the foreground, really complement it where it could have been quite a difficult well, you know what I'm saying. They're bringing something extra. They're not just foreground, and I think that's really important, isn't it? We get lulled sometimes into, I need to find the foreground, or what is the you know what I'm saying? Yeah. But all of the elements are adding here.
Exactly. Yes, I think often. I mean, and I do it myself. One gets obsessed with finding sort of a subject in the foreground, a definitive article, as it were, and actually. Your foregrounds don't necessarily have to be a thing. They can be a texture or a wash of color or something else, which work equally as well. And thank you for bringing that point up. I think it's an important one.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, gang. I'm going to roll us on. I mean, honestly, we're going to overrun. Let's just be honest. Or we're going to cut some images. But I hope everyone's going to get some stuff from this. So it's cool. Now, Phil has asked a question specifically about ICM. Phil, stick with us because we're going to come to that when we get to a relevant image to do with Andy. That I'm going to get him to answer that question for you, Phil. So Phil, who asked the question, bear with us. We're going to just touch now on. There was 3. It was really funny. I asked for the images off everyone. They send them in independently, and then I kind of tried to curate it into some sort of sense. And what was really interesting was the types of images I got and the vibes people had and how they then came together, because each of the participants sent in an image where there was just one kind of star of a tree. And I think it's a theme that is often very attractive. But it's been done in 3 different ways in these subsequent 3 images. And after these 3, we're actually going to go, as I said, onto non-autumnal or non-strictly autumnal, obviously autumnal images. So bear with us because we're going to have a nice mix of stuff. But let's start with you, Andy, first, because, well, you can tell us a little bit about the background of the image. But the first thing I want to say is, this is like, for me, in a way, a studio shot because of that backdrop, because the back makes the star for me, if you see what I mean. But just tell us a little bit about where we are and the thoughts behind this image.
Well, this image was on Dartmoor, and actually a lot of the points that you mentioned, Ed, about your image is exactly the thought process behind this image as well. It's all about the light and it's all about the shadow, and it's all about what the shadow has hidden, really. This tree was at the foot of a hillside, really, covered in bracken and whatnot, and it looked lovely, and I'd been past it during the day, and it was just a bit too busy, and the tree wasn't able to be the star of the show. And I looked on, well, in pre-photo pills days, but the photographer's ephemeris, I guess I sort of worked out where the sun was going to be as it sort of dropped and became warmer and more textured. And I thought, well, if I come back here sort of towards the end of the day, I might just get lucky, and the sun might not be hiding behind a cloud, and I might get some nice light on that hawthorn. And that's exactly what happened. And I was so pleased that I'd hung around and come back to it, because it was lovely. And a bit of dodging and burning, and hey presto, it just looks lovely. But it's all about the tree looking lovely, really.
Well, I'm sure you look lovely as well. But I think the the thing I really like about it is giving that space above it, but allowing that big space of not much above it, because it could be very tempting to crop right in and think, or make a nice little square or whatever it might be. But actually, it's that expanse of nothing, tonally, if we will. That actually is so impactful for me, and so just the choice of how to compose that, really, and obviously giving it enough space on the side. So if we're looking for a little star tree, as it were, Andy, I know we've talked obviously about making sure it can have separation, etc., but are there certain characteristics you're looking for? Is it making sure you've got that space around it? Is it just about the lighting you can find? Is it, you know what I'm saying? Are there things you look for?
It was the fact it was so heavily laden in berries, really, that drew me to it. And with having the steep slope behind it, sort of was helpful, really, because there was no sky to detract. And it allowed me to have the negative space, which I thought it deserved, really. I think negative space is quite an underrated thing, really, but I really like it. It's easy to go in tight, isn't it? And
yeah. But like we say, that maybe that negative space really helps this. Just very quickly, one thing you touched on, and before I keep us rolling, you mentioned the photographer's ephemeris, and for people who don't know what that is, and photo pills as well, do you want to explain just very briefly what you might use those for and what they do for anyone who's not aware?
Yeah, I mean, photo pills is the sort of gold standard now, and it has just about everything in there that you need for planning, really. You can look at locations on a map and see sunrise, sunset, moonrise, moonset, Milky Way positions, positions of where asteroids are going to be in the sky. And it's got augmented reality on it as well now. So, you can actually use the camera on your phone and look at a scene and see where the sunrise and sunset's going to be. So it's really, it's really very handy for planning. So, if you're in an area that you're not as familiar with, I think it can be a really helpful tool. And certainly if you're planning a trip somewhere, it's brilliant to be able to know sort of when the sun's coming around a headland, for example, or, I know that, Ed, you've got some coastal images, I think, haven't you? So, I mean, it's just knowing where sunrise and sunset is kind of part of it.
Yeah. And we'll get into that pre-planning conversation a little bit in a moment as well. Verity, I saw you trying to pop your head above there. Back in your box. There you go. I'm going to cover you again. Photopills.com, you can find there the app Andy was talking about, and a really useful bit of kit. Verity, let's come to you, because we're talking about trees being a star, and this is just a different scene, different location, different tree, different everything, but still making it the star. I know there's a nice little kind of background to this, so fill us in accordingly. Oh, she's frozen. It's the excitement. I put her on too much pressure there. Sorry, Rick. That's what you get when you try and move your head around. Oh, she's back. I think she's back.
No. Okay, I'm back. I don't know what's going on. It doesn't like me today. You find this tree, you take a photo, you think, found a nice, unique, interesting tree, and you get back and you edit, and you realise that Charlie's already done it about 10 times better than you, but that's how it goes. For me, this one's all about serendipity, though, and I think the tree is the main star, but I think that isn't really what makes the image. So the tree itself is great, and the light finally turned up, and this is at Crummock Water for anyone who wants to go and find it. It's a little bit of a walk from the roadside. But it's the two, and I think they're ravens, after much internet deliberation over whether they're crows or ravens. It's those two above the tree that really make it for me, and I think everything else has to fall in place. So
oh, we lost her. Let's see if she comes back. Let's give her a sec.
In the composition, if it was in landscape, and I think Andy's photo is very similar, and just getting back, just that little moment of the two of them flying above made the image for me. And I think I was a little bit annoyed at first that they weren't sharp, but actually I kind of like that now. I kind of like that there's a bit of movement, there's a bit of narrative there, and it's more about the connection than it is about it being perfect. And I think the other thing I try to do in camera is just to keep the top of that tree below the first ridge of the fell. So there's a little bit of a gap there between it, and then it was just about waiting for the light. But yeah, the ravens were just a happy, serendipitous accident that made the image pop for me, and it made it out my Lightroom because of that.
The depths of Verity's Lightroom, which is, I can tell you, a deathly and a dangerous place, full of excitement and activity.
And mediocrity.
Yeah, well, like the rest of us. Verity, Charlie would have been very, very proud of you for that, nipping the tree underneath the first fell. Charlie, come on, Charlie must be here, surely. Maybe he's away. The question is, though, did you have to stand on a stepladder to get that separation?
No, just a couple of workshop participants now.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
Just held the camera above my head.
Yeah. That's a different form of stacking, is when we ask workshop participants to stand on each other's backs. Anyone who's been out with Verity should know that one very well. Okay, good. Thank you. I'm going to keep us rolling for time reasons. Everyone out there, again, we really appreciate it. Great numbers tonight. Really nice to see so many of you watching us live on the live stream, and if you're catching up after, we appreciate that too. Any questions, just bang them in the comments box. Ed, I've got this as a little star because I know there's a few trees here and it's maybe a little less blatantly a star, but we also wanted to touch a little bit on that positioning within Woodland, and certainly talking about being near the edge of things, didn't we, as well?
Yes. Yeah, well, I'd like Andy to talk about my images because he already made all the excellent points that I was going to talk about.
Sorry.
It'd be amazing. look, I find woodland photography really, really hard, and it's partly because it is difficult, and Andy makes it look so easy, but it really isn't. And so I find it much more comfortable to operate kind of on the edge of woodland, where I can order things. So I have a sort of, my other affliction is order in my photographs. I mean, even the first image that you talked about, Sam, it was very kind of regimented and ordered. And so I sort of slightly panic the deeper into a wood I go, because I can't sort of see, and I lose my ability to make structured photographs. And so operating kind of on the edge in the heathland allows that visual construction to take place, rather easier for my mind. And then, as Andy's already pointed out, you also get the opportunity to maybe shoot into the mist a little bit more and create some visual space around the star of the show, which is obviously this lovely show-off tree on the left-hand side. But because of operating in a landscape with a little bit more space, I think the tree on the bottom right really makes the image for me. It's sort of the baby kind of arcing back in awe at the star of the show, saying, I want to be you when I grow up. And I really like that little juxtaposition. And then you've got the sort of bigger pines in the background as the eye recedes. But then again, the sense of space, which gives the main tree a bit of authority in the image, because it was quite small. I mean, I suppose it was only about 4 or 5 feet high. And it would have been lost against a busier background. So a long story, but it's operating around the margins gives me the ability to control relationships and visual positioning and structure and order in a photograph. And that's kind of where I find more comfort as a photographer, rather than being in dense woodland, which I find quite difficult.
Yeah, really good point, Ed. And I think a lot of people probably feel the same with you about maybe struggling in some of the more chaotic zones. I think that's something we all struggle with to some degree. But yes, some people, I think, do see differently, as it were. But I really as well like the point about the smaller one on the bottom right, because if you just take that out, and I like the arching back thing, but if you take it out completely, there's a kind of, it would be much harder to balance that, as it were. There'd be that big zone there, wouldn't there? And you've obviously pulled that together, and there's that nice sort of zag through it as well. So can I just ask though, Ed, are you like me? If you're in bed at night and you suddenly think, I didn't straighten my shoes on the rack downstairs, do I have to go and do it? Are you one of them?
I'm afraid yes, I am, unfortunately. It's a paradox, isn't it? Because as a landscape photographer, you operate in an environment that is so uncontrollable, like the weather. You can't control the weather. You can't control whether there's going to be mist or not. And yet in my photographs, I have to have that sort of element of control, and otherwise I don't feel as though I make a satisfying image to me. So yes, OCD, straightening shoes on the rack, all that sort of stuff. I'm afraid, that's okay. Perhaps my photography is a reflection of my personality and wanting to control things. The paradox being, of course, you can't as a landscape photographer.
No. Actually, talking of controlling things, and this is I'm going to throw this at you, Ed, because someone has asked, and I think it's a point that comes up a lot with woodland images, and I don't think it's an issue, but someone has asked the question: was it deliberate cutting off the top of the tree? And I'm assuming they're talking about the obviously the pines in the background, but we can answer that. But also, there are decisions commonly, aren't there, when we're in and around woodland about where do we cut stuff off. And because we're always told, leave space, because you can't have anything crop. Well, always you've got to cut something off if you're in the middle of a woodland. But do you want to just pick up on that, Ed?
I think it's a really great point, and I think normally another sort of OCD point is not cutting through things and having each element in your image retain its own authority by showing the whole thing. I mean, I thought that the background trees, I mean, I can't honestly remember. I think I probably didn't have anything wide enough. And the problem was, the size and the shape of the main actor here, the main tree, had to be just right. And so I couldn't kind of avoid, I couldn't actually get the whole, I mean, those pines are multiples taller than the two little actors in the front. And so it was actually very difficult to get everything in the image. And I thought as supporting actors, it didn't really matter. That I lost maybe a little bit of the top of the far tree, but it's a really good point, because normally I'd be a bit OCD about that, but in this case, because it's sort of recessionary and it's fading into the mist, I thought I'd probably get away with it. But that may irritate some people, and I'd be quite happy to accept that criticism if somebody wanted to say, well, you should have actually given more space at the top of the frame. The problem with leaving more space at the top of the frame is you can kind of diminish the composition, slightly starts to fall apart, because you kind of diminish the tree on the left hand side by giving more space to the top. And I'd rather have made that the compromise that I made, as opposed to letting the authority of the main actor diminish.
Yeah, that compromise is the word, isn't it? There's so many times where physically we can't go back forward, or we don't have, lengthwise, and like you say, you change the relationships between things as focal lengths change. So that's always a common thing. But where to crop stuff off is often the difficulty in Woodland, amongst other things. Cool, thanks Ed for picking up on that. I'm going to just put my foot on the gas a tiny bit. We're going to talk non-obviously autumn, although for some this might be obviously autumn if they know where the light is during different times of the year. Andy, this is an iconic shooting location for people on the south coast especially, and I know lots of people who don't live around where you and I are make
top secret Dorset location. Though.
Yeah, it's in Devon. It's in North Devon. People make a sort of pilgrimage there, and isn't it? Why it's such an iconic scene. But obviously, it inside out. But tell us why, from an autumnal point of view, there is a slight kind of twist on the Corfe vibes.
Yeah, well, in summer, of course, the shadows. Should you get a nice inversion like that in the summer, the shadows would be in the opposite direction. So it's just nice to sort of have it the other way around for a change, I suppose. And we typically get more of these conditions in the autumn when the ground is still warm and we start getting the cold nights, and that's when you tend to get these conditions. So autumn wouldn't be complete without a few gratuitous Corfe Castle shoots, really.
Well, you've touched a little bit there on the conditions. Let's just nail into that a little bit more, if you're happy to share a couple of gems, Andy. Two things. There's a blog that Andy's done on his website, which I'm going to share the link for in the comments, which is actually to do with weather apps and finding those. But there's also lots of other good things on his website, so do go and check them out. But if for the amateur what's the word? Weather watcher.
Meteorologist.
Thank you, Andy. You could have just let it go. For the amateur meteorologists out there, what is it that you're looking for that makes you pack your camera bag at night and make sure there's a battery and a memory card in it ready for the morning?
Funny enough, I do obsessively check my forecasting apps just before bed, just to make certain whether I need to put my flask out on the worktop or not, and have everything ready to go by the door and set an alarm. Generally, high humidity, if you're looking for mist, high humidity, low wind speeds, but not completely still, dew point and air temperature being very similar, and rain on a preceding day is often quite a good help, because it sort of adds to localized humidity. So those things generally are quite good things to look for. In the case of Corfe Castle, funny enough, often if mist is on the forecast, then you don't see the turrets because they're completely buried in the mist. So you need to find high ground. Other places that wouldn't be an issue, I suppose, but I've got a little lay-by nearby that I go to, which is right on very high ground. And from there in the morning, I can see where there's any mist forming, and I know which way to go. And sometimes there's none, so just go off and do something else, go to the coast or something like that. But I'm obsessed with not missing a misty morning, really.
It's intoxicating. But, and before we move on, two things. I've put the link in the comments. So if you're watching live, you just maybe open that in another window. Don't leave us, obviously that'd be horrific. We're saving the best to last as well, but do follow up. If you're following this after the fact, you can find the link in the comments, and it's on andyfarrow.co.uk in the blog section, a whole thing about weather apps and useful things about them all. I mean,
Some apps have more data than others, so some of them have good dew point forecasts and some don't at all, and it's just nice to have access to all that
yeah. And I suppose,
data really to make a decision.
yeah, it's an
Like I
educated
say,
decision, isn't it?
if the mist was so thick or the wind was too high and it was just making it messy for the castle, then Woodland's a perfectly good, second best, isn't it?
Yeah, it's that back to that thing of Verity saying pivot earlier, isn't it? If,
Yeah, totally.
good friends reference there as well. Okay, let's keep rolling for time reasons. Verity, this is a iconic scene, shot iconically by an icon. Can I get that in anymore? The trees of Buttermere.
Those bloody buttermere trees. Honestly, you can't get away from them. But there's a reason, because they're so photogenic. Those pines. I cannot pass this without attempting some kind of image. And this is one of those images. All three of my images so far have been from Crumicle Buttermere. I feel like they've just been sort of trapped in the Western Lakes, and I think the next two I'm allowed out. I'm allowed in different parts of the region. But this, for me, is a little bit about, one, shooting on a telephoto, so being able to kind of push in, because the sky really wouldn't have added much for me at this point. And two, waiting for the moment the light breaks through. And I always find the moment the light breaks through, taking that image, and then the image that probably comes about, 2 or 3 seconds afterwards, there is a difference. That kind of brightness, that kind of veracity of the light, I think, cannot be replicated in the images that come afterwards. And it's psychological, because I have a connection to that moment of like, oh yeah, the light's finally arrived and I can take the shot and get the shot. But for me, there is really something there that I find just elevates the image a tiny bit more. And I think for me as well, if we're talking sort of technical, this is one of those reasons to break the rule of thirds, like to put the horizon in the middle, because I want to emphasize that reflection. And I did use a polarizer for this to bring out that reflection a little bit more as well. But yeah, I think this is on a 100 to 400, so I'm probably at 100 mil, because knowing me, I was probably in the middle of changing lenses before the light arrived, so had a panicked moment of like, quick, get the image, get the shot. So it's quite tight in, but I like the way there's almost obviously the reflection is really nice because it's still for once, and there's that lovely relationship between the trees and the fell in the background.
The light is just gorgeous, and that point you make, Verity, that just even 10 seconds can be the difference, right? It'd still be nice, but it's when you get 8 or 10 or whatever in a row, and you go back and you look at, we all do this in Lightroom at various things, similar scenes, and why is the one we pick out? Why is that the one we pick? What is it about that? Is it light? Is it composition? Is it because something else has happened? And you can just, that feeling of the light, on the left-hand side is just, gorgeous. It's beautiful. And colour, green, there's all sorts of great things about it. I'm just sort of saying words now. I've lost it. I've lost my composure.
It's a word salad. Here we go. I can join in on this. So.
It sounds word salad after 43 minutes. This is what happens, everyone. I've been autumned into hell.
You've gone full Bernard Matthews, haven't you?
Gone full Bernard Matthews, exactly. Nice reference.
But it's worth waiting, because this is, especially at Buttermere, it takes a while for the light to get above the fell when you get into autumn. I think this is like first week in October, so it's still really green at that point. But this is probably 9:30, getting towards 10 o'clock in the morning when it finally finds its way over. And, so you can have a leisurely breakfast and then wander out and get your shot, and then, spend the rest of the day doing something else. It's all good.
Stand on someone's back. Yeah,
absolutely, yeah.
Fun fact, just before we move on, I have never seen these trees despite having been here 4 or 5 times, because every time I go, it is absolutely like dank, fogged in. Just I literally have never. I have seen them, but they've never ever been any light ever. Anyway, all right, I'm going to roll this on because we're sort of drowning in wonderful images. We're in the segment of this talk which is not strictly woodland, although there's been a little bit of that, and trees. We're talking about weather there with Verity and waiting for the right moment. Often, Ed, it can very much depend on what's preceded and maybe what's coming after, and edges of weather can be an exciting but dangerous and wet place to be.
Yes, edge of woodland. I find myself on the edge of parties. I be on the edge of things all the time. That's just who I am. This is all about being on the edge of weather systems, and we get a lot of weather systems obviously in autumn. So I thought I'd chuck this image in. I mean, it's a very famous spot. I think Bill Brandt shot this in the early 60s, which is probably the first image I saw of it. Charlie's done an amazing black and white version. And I've got, talking about waiting for the light, I've got an archive of failure from this location, which is probably bigger than the Getty's archive. I used to set out, when the weather apps told me it was going to be good weather, I'd beat off to this location. It's probably the closest bit of coast to where I live. So I'd drive down and I'd get there, and it was invariably very nice and nice to be there, but just not dramatic, a bit meh. And so, I've got Hasselblad transparencies, I've got 617 transparencies, I've got old crunchy digital files, and they're all rubbish. And what I worked out was that actually what I need to do is to set out when the weather is really, really bad. And as long as you've got that kind of sign that, the weather system has hit rock bottom and it's going to improve, you can actually end up with something amazing, just on the clearing winter storm and all that sort of stuff, Ansel Adams. So this was basically a big storm system that was moving through, and literally the light lasted before the sun dipped probably 10 or 15 minutes, and half an hour earlier it was socked in, and half an hour later it was in darkness. And so that's essentially was the key to this image. So I guess the point I'm making is, although all those weather apps that we're encouraged to look at, often it pays to kind of pick your moments and set out when it doesn't look good and the rain is still hammering down, because on the edge of these weather systems is where a lot of the magic can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I would imagine, Andy and Verity, you've been on the edge of things, and it's back to that point Verity made about just that 10 seconds when the light came over from breaks over the fell. We've all had that where the heavens have opened, and then just as it changes, it's like, I call it the hallelujah, because it just is like, right, we've got a game on now. I had the thing with the Dolomite said, the tour you're now doing in June next year, we had it, and it was just completely massive big mountain storm, and it just broke, and we had about 30 seconds of light coming sideways. Everyone was running around, crazy, and then it started pissing down. Excuse me, it started raining again. That's how excited I was. I'm getting that excited now.
Yeah.
You've
got to be there, right? You've got to be there. You've got to take a risk, and
bingo.
You've got to be there and be prepared to sort of stand there, soaked, and not get a picture, because there is a chance that that asymmetric risk-reward ratio. Suddenly you get that 10 minutes as you just described, and off we go.
Yeah. Absolutely, and really a beautiful image, very, like you say, iconic place, and the light on the water is just, it's that molten silver, can't quite describe it. I think we all know it, we've all seen it, and we've all seen how light reacts like that with water. So beautifully done. Archive of Failure, Ed. I think that's going to be my next book. So thank you for suggesting me a title.
I wrote it down first.
Maybe
I've literally written it down.
Yeah, maybe we could do a joint effort. Sam and Verity's Archive of Failure, curated by Ed.
5% royalties, please, to me for the title.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Stay with us, everyone. And if the guys are willing to give me an extra sort of 5-10 minutes, we will get through it. We've got 6 images left, that's all. So we wanted to throw a couple of different things in at you. We've obviously had a nice mix of locations, weathers, standing on people, all sorts of stuff's been going on tonight. But Andy, there's a little bit of technique related jiggery pokery that we wanted to talk about here, and using this image as an example.
Yeah, a little bit of fun, really. I don't tend to do a huge amount of multiple exposure in the conventional sense, but it's a really handy feature in the camera, so I do like to use it from time to time. And this was case in point, really. I go to this is just a small pond in a nature reserve, actually, but there's some trees around the edge that just reflect in it. And when the light's not too glary, it can be really, really beautiful. In fact, I think the next image of mine that you've got is taken in the same pond, funny enough. But this tree reflecting is kind of cool. And the wind was just blowing the leaves around. And as I was standing there sort of wondering if it was going to be something I could work with or not, I noticed that as the wind changed, they were blowing one direction for a few minutes and then they were blowing the other direction. I thought, oh, this is quite interesting. So I set the camera up on the tripod. I think that's with a 100-400. It's sort of, I had to get a little bit further back and up the bank to look down on it. And I basically did in-camera multiple exposure, did 2 frames with the polarizer to sort of kill the glare, but not too much to kill it. You know, it's just controlling the glare, really. So I did one with a 6-stop filter that created the long trails. And then I took that filter off, waited a few minutes, shortened my shutter speed quite a lot. And then when the leaves started drifting in the other way, I did my second shot with a much shorter shutter speed. And so it created in camera this really beautiful crisscross of lines. And I just thoroughly enjoyed it. I didn't get it right first time, but it's a really nice way of just whiling away a bit of time. And I suppose you could do exactly the same thing in Photoshop with 2 things and blend modes, but it's much more satisfying, I think, to sort of come away with a raw file that just looks pretty good to begin with.
Yeah,
it's just a nice. Sorry, Sam, but
no, I'm sorry. I didn't
working with just a nice way of creating those textures, and it's a good feature of the camera, and I use it for river scenes as well. So it's a nice way of not having too much of a, like what would you call it? Like a really misty, sort of mystical river scene where it looks like you need a fairy sort of in it.
Yeah.
But you lose the texture in the water then. So I think by using the multiple exposure, you can kind of build up with the same technique completely. The areas that are moving fast become a slow exposure, and the areas that are just splashes give more texture. So it's sort of the best of both worlds. This technique's a really, nice thing to play with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really love the image, and doing it in the field at the time is, yes, you can do it after, isn't it? But it's that realization of the idea. It's realizing the idea while you're there and being able to react to it, and then you might shoot another because you're going to just adjust things slightly, whatever it might be, to just finesse it to what you envisage.
Yeah.
And that's part of the joy, isn't it?
Yeah. So, by the time you spent 20 minutes doing that, the lights change and you might get something else really nice as well. So
it's
always a win-win.
We've all lost 20 minutes staring into a pond on cold October mornings. I think that's a classic landscape thing to do. Now, the question Phil asked earlier was actually a little more aligned to ICM images, but I'm going to throw it in here because it's in terms of extended techniques. Phil has asked, does Andy shoot ICM images in his Woodland? And if so, what range of shutter speeds might he shoot at? Andy, do you do much ICM when you're out and about?
Not a lot, I must admit. I have done. There's one patch of woods in Arn with what are they? They're silver birch, and they're fantastic for just doing the sort of up and down sort of blur, and they don't need a huge amount of. They don't need a hugely long exposure, generally speaking. Maybe 3 or 4 seconds, I find, is usually more than enough. And for those vertical ones, it's all about getting your tripod dead straight and using a geared head to do it. Because I think with a ball head, you're sort of wobbling all over the place, which might look good actually. But if you want to go with the straight bows, then I suppose the geared head probably helps just to sort of twist it up and down a bit.
Yeah. depends on your speed of your movement as well a little bit
Yeah.
within the user. So
Yeah. I can't say that I do it a huge amount, to be honest. I kind of like the multiple exposure. Then I think I like a bit too much order, a bit like Ed probably. I kind of like that tree anchors things.
Yeah,
So
we've still got that strong structural element to the imagery. Yeah. Well, experimentation, Phil, is the answer on that, and just have a bit of a wiggle in the woods, so to speak. Let's Verity, let's keep moving. Eyes straight, thank you. Otherwise, I'll put someone's comment over your face again. There you go.
Okay, yeah, this image. This is, right, okay, you have some mornings that are gateway drugs, and this was my gateway drug to landscape photography for real. Like, I've been dabbling, I've been enjoying it, I've been learning the process, but this particular morning just blew my mind. And I feel like, in some level, I've been chasing that morning ever since. And it was November 2nd, 2015. Not that it was really important to me, but I've got the date sort of emblazoned into my mind. Yeah. And it's kind of hammers home Ed's point about, like, sometimes, weather reports, whatever, just go outside and it could be completely different. And this morning, which is on Derwent Water in the Lake District, was supposed to be cloudy, it was supposed to be miserable. And me and my friend, we poked our head out in the morning and it was completely clear. So rushed down to the lakeside and had maybe just this, it was just an amazing morning. Everywhere there was mist, there was colour, there was eventually some light. And everywhere I pointed my camera, there was something else that was just exciting to take a picture of. And it's another one of those moments where you have to keep at it and don't leave too quickly, because this was taken about 10:30 in the morning. So, and it started to cloud over, as you can see, but there was just this one bit of light that came through and illuminated the island, and the colours that year were fantastic. Anyway, and I'm no nature photographer by any standard. I don't have the patience. But the geese, I've got two images of this. The geese are in that position and they're a little bit closer to the island. But the fact that there was three of them, they're so close to the water. I'm shooting handheld at this point. I've just popped my ISO up a bit and just firing off shots here, there, and everywhere, because it was just such one of those mornings where you kind of could. And the geese at Derwent Water have been so good to me that I think some people believe they're now paid actors, because they just keep popping up in my. I've got an image from last week and they're in it again. So I'm like, me and the geese at Derwent Water, we're pals.
They're drones. They're drones. They're not geese.
Yeah. They're stuffed animals. It's like the antelope in that wildlife
Robot
picture
geese
from a couple of years.
Yeah.
And it's serendipity again. It's just being in that place at that moment, knowing how your camera works and how to make sure you capture that. And of course, as in the archive of failure, there's plenty of shots that didn't work out, but all of those build up to the ones that do. And then you get a moment like this, and I get the privilege of just committing that to a digital file. And it's probably, and I'm not a big fan of my own work, but it's probably one of those photos that I'll never get tired of looking at, because it pulls me straight back to that moment. And it kind of makes me emotional, because I was like, this is the point. This is where I was like, you know what? This is what I want to do. I want to get out. I want to be in these conditions. I want to connect with the landscape. And yeah, it was, I guess in some ways it was pretty life-changing, because that was the moment where I was like, yeah, let's go down this road and see where it leads.
Awesome. Life-changing. I hope you're ready, Ed. You're up next.
Nothing like setting a high bar.
Yeah. No, I think what's really good about it, well, this is an image I kind of just know, and I've known for a few years, and I see it, and it's one of those where you immediately attach to people, you know what I'm saying, because it might have been in competitions and in all the rest of it. But I think what's really interesting about what you said there, lots of things, but the fact that photography can link us to these emotional moments and these emotional states. And when we go out there, especially if you're doing this as somebody watching who may be whatever, an amateur, a keen amateur, or a semi-professional, it doesn't matter, they're just words, it doesn't mean anything. When you're out there with the camera, and you have these moments, and you'll remember these always. And it is about those moments. It isn't about producing an asset or a bit of content or a bit of whatever. It's those moments that we're all trying to reach, and that you can keep and lock away and become part of your life. And I'll move on before I start crying. Right, we've just got a few more images, everyone. All right, so if the guys are willing to give me an extra few minutes-ish, everybody, yes, I'm just going to assume you're saying yes, fine, that's good. If you stay and watch us, we'll all appreciate that as well. We won't be long, I promise. I'll keep us fairly well on time. Ed, there's been a bit of a water theme going on in the last couple of images. But obviously getting to the coast in autumn is good to do, because light can be very interesting, and especially on the south coast, right?
Definitely. So this is actually Cuckmere Haven. So if you follow the river that was up last, sort of a quarter of a mile on, this is where you end up. This is the beach where the river estuary outlets. And just behind me, over my right shoulder, is the famous Coast Guard cottages, which, lots of picture postcards of that going on. I prefer it from this angle. And this is the Seven Sisters cliffs. And somebody told me actually the other day that if you're making a film and you want the White Cliffs of Dover, you don't actually film the White Cliffs of Dover, because the White Cliffs of Dover don't erode fast enough, so you don't get that nice clean white cliff. They're sort of a bit scrubby and stuff. So these are actually stunt cliffs. They're incorporated into other people's films.
Paid actors.
Yes, exactly. Anyway, the point about this photograph really suits my style. The light is lovely. It's quite soft. It's painterly. It's a sort of landscape that I like. I like making. And I got there for sunrise, and we've all been there, haven't we? Sunrise was basically a period of time where it was just grey, and it just got slightly lighter grey. And so I sort of sulked behind my tripod for an hour. But the point about photographing in autumn and indeed winter is that your shooting window is so much longer. And this was probably taken, I don't know, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours after sunrise, and there was just like a little break in the cloud base that you can actually see, sort of that little streak of blue, which gave me a moment when I got a little bit of modelling light on the cliffs and the luminosity in the water, and suddenly the reflection of the clouds gave me that kind of that atmosphere. And it wasn't about sunrise at all. It was actually about hanging around for another couple of hours and still being able to get that quality of light in autumn, which made the image. So that's it. That's the story. Very simple.
Yeah, well, lots of similar themes coming up, isn't there? Perseverance, everybody. Being able to adapt, working to your strengths. These are things that keep coming up. Light, the attentiveness to light, selecting the right moments. All things we hear, cliches in a way, but evening has kind of cemented, I think, a lot of those points down. And Ed, I'm sure with your ordered mind, you would have spent time thinking about your struts in the water here for some time as well.
Yeah. True enough. Yeah. Don't take me down that road again, though, Sam. People think I'm a freak.
Not at this time of night, no. So what we're going to do, gang, is we're going to do 60 seconds each on our last images. All right, I'm sorry to push these on time because we've got a lot to say, but I really appreciate all the time you've given me, and I hope everyone watching has really appreciated, because we've had some great knowledge going on tonight. So we've got 3 images left. We're going to do 60 seconds each on them. We're talking really a little bit about the end of August shooting period, because a lot of people, it depends where you are in the country as to where might be the peak. But I am a big fan of the end of autumn down here and in the New Forest sort of area. Andy, this is an end of autumn image, isn't it? From the
it was mid-November, I think. It was quite late, and it was the last autumn image I shot last year. I think it was last year, and it was one of those misty forecasts that never really came to anything. And so I went and had a pot around a little nature reserve, the same pond as I did the multiple exposure image at. And there was just this tiny little bit of mist there. And so I just set up on the bank and shot this nice little intimate scene. It was just a lovely bit of balance, really. Just perfect light, nice quiet moment. And just nice being in a nature reserve, just being out to enjoy it. if the forecast had been rubbish, I wouldn't have got to enjoy that. And I got a nice image. So
Yeah.
it was, doesn't need to be anything like an iconic castle necessarily.
Well, it's a nice contrast, isn't it? It's that quiet, and it's that sense of peace, quietness, calm that we feel physically when we're often in these places. Sometimes not. There can be a road right behind you, but the goal is to try to keep that peace within the image. And this, for me, is really, really beautiful for lots of reasons that we don't have time to go into. But a really nice example of that end of autumn still giving you a different type of image, perhaps.
I think the oaks just give such a lovely colour.
Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it? Fire, just like you, Andy. Verity.
Yes.
Again, end of autumn, pretty painterly here going on as well, got to say.
Yeah, so this is one of those unexpected events. I was actually running a 1-day workshop, so it's in the Peak District. I think I ruined the group had this amazing day. So we had fog for the majority of the day. We had a fog bow, which I still don't know how to take a photo of that looks good. And at the end of the day, all of the fog sank into the Hope Valley, and we had like a inverse cloud inversion in the sense that it was at sunset rather than sunrise, which is something that I'd never seen before that point. I haven't seen since. I think it's happened once, but I wasn't around for it. And all of these workshop participants were like, "Wow, landscape photography! This is great!" And
like this every day. Yeah.
yeah. And unfortunately, I think if they ever went back, they'd be like, "Hang on, where's all my dramatic conditions?" But I absolutely love these birch, and for me, November trumps October for autumn colour. I really love November. From the first week onwards, you get frost, you get just a richness to the colour that is sometimes not present in October. And you've got this silver birch down in Bowl Hill Quarry, and because of the way the direction light was completely different, the fog was dissipating, and it was just lighting up what was left of that foliage, and it was an absolute moment, which is what photography is all about. And again, it takes me right back to standing on Millstone Edge, looking out at this scene and thinking, you know what, this is all right. This is just fabulous. And you got to get out there to experience moments like that. So, yeah, autumn, thumbs up.
But yeah, autumn, it passes. It gets the royal
10 out of 10
Milligan seal of approval. Thank you, Verity. I'm not going to say anything extra about it just for time reasons, but I really, really love this one. Shouldn't have left all my favourites till the end. That was silly. Ed, we're going to have 60 seconds from Ed. Then I'm going to tell you what's coming up next. Hang around for that because we've got an absolutely exciting live stream coming up next. I'm global, and that is not even stretching it. So bear with me for the news about that. But Ed, 60 seconds, because we've talked about all these things. We've talked about preparing. We've talked about being ready. We've talked about everything. But sometimes serendipity knocks on the door.
Yeah, total fake, this image, really. I mean, autumn clinging on. I think both Andy and Verity have expounded that theme quite nicely. And this is another example, I suppose. This is a little patch of beach woodland, about sort of 45 minutes drive from where I live, which I go to quite a bit. And for me, I suppose it's a woodland that I can work with because the trees behave themselves. They're all kind of nice verticals. You know, they're not sort of chaotic and stuff. So I find solace in there. So I got up one morning, forecast a mist. I drove down 45 minutes into the wild west of Surrey, and it was socked in everywhere apart from this wood. I mean, it must have been the only piece of land for 50 miles radius that didn't have any mist in it. So I kind of hung around. I mean, the light was still nice, but atmosphere a little bit lacking. And I mean, total fortune. A group of, I think, coppice workers just started a bonfire and just out of shot. And this is actually smoke from the fire drifting across the scene, just softening the background quite nicely and allowing, you know, the tree, the main actor, to gain some light and gain some separation with the smoke from the coppice fires. So a bit tongue in cheek to finish off with. Very lucky, but you know, hey, I suppose, you know, you've got to be out there and sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you don't.
Exactly. Thank you. That's exactly the point I think that I want to take away from all of this. we encourage everyone to get out as much as possible in their local areas whenever they can, as well as obviously joining us when we can take you to beautiful places where we obviously call the weather into Light and Land HQ and we get whatever we need for that day. We just say, hey guys, we need a bit of this, we need a bit of that. Tap, 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 they pop in the computer, up it comes. But going out locally as often as you can is a good way to repeat the skills that you might learn on a workshop and really finesse things in your own locale as well. So just as I wrap us up, I'm going to come to you individually and say a huge thank you for all the knowledge sharing that's been going on. You have all been very open with your information and sharing all the stuff about the images. Good job I didn't add 5 autumn images in as well. We'd be here till midnight, wouldn't we? But I really appreciate Ed, Andy and Verity joining me. If you're watching out there, they're getting paid 10p per like, so make sure you hit a like button before you disappear to let them know that you've appreciated sharing this hour with us, and or drop us a comment. It'd be really lovely to hear that you've enjoyed the show, such as Brenda. Sorry, Verity, you're not going to see much of this last minute. Brenda saying thank you for all the beautiful and inspiring images. But before I go, I am going to say to you all out there watching in cyber land, next up, and I've even got a little ticky thingy bobby, there we go, Monday the 4th of November, I am going to be talking to Richard Young, who is leading a Light and Land tour to New Zealand next year. And Richard is a New Zealand resident. He lives out there. He's a professional landscape photographer who lives and works in New Zealand. He is leading our tour out there, and he's joining us on the live stream from New Zealand. How about that for effort? I did offer to the office to fly out there and we do it together. For some reason, which logistics couldn't quite get it over the line. But Monday the 4th of November, I'll be in Dorset. Richard will be on the South Island of New Zealand talking to us live via the magic of the internet about his trip down there next year. So Monday the 4th of November, we've got a 2 or 3 week gap now, but we'll be back Monday the 4th of November. However, let me just get rid of that so we can see everyone looking all beautiful. Lots of nice comments coming in, and we'd have to cover your face here, Verity. I don't know who Verity is. That's because
my alter ego.
Well, let's watch out for Verity's new book, The Archive of Failure. Thanks so much, everyone, for staying around. We have a great audience tonight. Do join us on the next one, all right? It's lots of good fun on the live stream. These jokes don't get any better, I'm afraid. Stuart's been watching from New Zealand. He's been very confused about the fact we're talking about autumn in October. I think that's completely blown his brains down there. Mark, thank you, and Shay as well. But I've kept everyone far too long. Genuinely, guys, I'm really appreciative for you sharing your time with us. A lot of work goes in beforehand in terms of curating and images for everyone, so appreciate you giving us that. Find out more about what everybody's doing at lightandland.co.uk. You can join any of these wonderful folk on their workshops. They all have things coming up. Some have spaces, some don't, but all will have more workshops coming in 2025. And we would appreciate you joining us on any one of those. There's too many comments. I can't keep up and talk at the same time. But just know, everyone, that we've had a wonderful evening. And I am honestly going to let you go anytime now. Right, that's it. Good night. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Verity. And we'll see you all again very soon. Goodbye for now.